She was cheated on, so she kissed a stranger in front of her ex, not knowing he was her new boss. The dim orange light of the Onyx bar was supposed to look fancy, but tonight it just felt scary. Paige Blake's heart was beating so fast. It felt like loud drums banging against the smooth jazz music playing through the speakers. Her friend's text message kept repeating in her head, "He's here with her. Don't do anything crazy." But it was too late for that, and then she saw them. Sitting in a soft velvet seat in the corner was her boyfriend of 3 years, Charles, and leaning close to him, laughing in a way that sounded like breaking glass, was the woman from his office he promised was just a friend. Her hand was on his leg and his hand was in her hair. This wasn't a friendly talk. It was proof that he was cheating on her. A cold, sharp pain shot through Paige's chest. It hurt so much she gasped. For a moment she couldn't move. She felt frozen like a statue made of sadness and hurt. Then the pain turned into white-hot anger. She walked toward them. Her body felt stiff and she could only see them like they were the only two people in the room. "Charles," she said. Her voice was surprisingly calm. He looked up and the big smile on his face disappeared. First he looked scared, then annoyed. "Paige, what are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," she said, looking at the woman beside him who now looked very uncomfortable. Charles sighed and ran his hand through his perfectly neat hair. He didn't even look embarrassed. He looked bored. "Look, Paige, let's not make a big deal out of this." "A big deal?" she repeated, laughing in a sad way. "You're cheating on me in public in a bar where lots of people we know come and you're worried about me making a big deal?" He stood up then. His face got mean and cold. "All right, you want the truth?" he said, his voice quiet and mean. "What did you think would happen?" "I need someone who's as good as me." "Someone exciting?" "You're boring, Paige. You're too easy to predict." She, he pointed to the woman, is a challenge. Being embarrassed in front of everyone felt like being hit. He hadn't just broken her heart. He had made her feel small and worthless in front of people they both knew. Angry and ashamed tears filled her eyes. She looked at his proud, mean face and a crazy, wild idea popped into her mind. She wasn't going to leave crying. She was going to hurt his huge ego. Her eyes searched the bar and found a man sitting alone at the counter. He was tall, dark, and super handsome. He wore a suit that probably cost more than her car. He seemed powerful and calm in a scary way. His stillness made people notice him more than any loud person could. He was clearly the most powerful man in the room. Perfect. Without thinking, Paige turned her back on Charles. She walked straight to the stranger. He looked up, surprised when she came close. She didn't say anything. She reached out, grabbed his expensive suit jacket, pulled him forward, and kissed him. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was an angry, strong, powerful kiss. It was a kiss that showed 3 years of love and 1 night of heartbreak. For just a second, the stranger was frozen, shocked by what she did. Then, to her surprise, she felt his hand on her lower back, pulling her closer. He kissed her back with strong, controlled pressure that made electricity shoot through her. She finally pulled away, breathing hard, her lips tingling. She didn't look at the stranger. She turned and stared at Charles, whose mouth was hanging wide open in complete shock. "It turns out, Charles," she said, her voice clear and strong with winning fire, "I was looking for something more exciting too, and with that," she turned and walked out of the bar with her head held high. She left behind her shocked ex-boyfriend, a room full of stunned people watching, and a mysterious, curious stranger at the bar. She never said a single word to him. Monday morning at Innovate Design Studio was crazy and full of coffee. Paige threw herself into her work, using complicated design grids and colors to hide from the bad feelings from the weekend. She had successfully ignored Charles's many angry texts and voicemails, but the memory of her own crazy act, kissing a complete stranger, made her face turn red every time she thought about it. It had been a moment of crazy, satisfying madness, but now in the bright light of day it just felt crazy. Around 10 in the morning, an excited buzz went through the office. An email marked "Very Important" landed in every employee's inbox. Subject: Emergency meeting for everyone. Do not miss. The body of the email was short and shocking. Innovate Design Studio had been bought out right away. They were now part of the huge worldwide company Harrington Media. A meeting was scheduled for 11 a.m. to meet the new boss. The conference room was packed. The air felt thick with nervous energy and whispered guesses. Paige stood in the middle of the crowd with her coworkers, making nervous jokes to hide her own growing worry. "Well, there goes our freedom to be creative." her desk mate Leo said quietly. I hear the Harrington media people are like sharks in business suits. I just hope the new boss likes our work, Paige whispered back, and keeps us hired. At exactly 11 a.m., the company's HR director, a nervous-looking man named Mr. Henderson, walked onto the small stage at the front of the room. Good morning, everyone, he began. His voice was shaking a little. As you know, this is a day of big change for Innovate. It is my great honor to introduce the leader who will be guiding us into this new and exciting future. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our new boss, Mr. Christopher Harrington. A man walked onto the stage and Paige's world stopped. It was him, the stranger from the bar. He was even more powerful on stage. His presence commanded the entire room. He wore the same quiet power like a perfectly fitted suit. His cool gray eyes looked across the crowd, studying and judging. Then they found her. His eyes locked onto hers from across the room. There was no big change in his stone-like face, but she saw it. A flicker of something in his eyes. A spark of recognition, a flash of surprise, and something else, something that looked terrifyingly like amusement. He knew. Her heart, which had stopped moments before, now started hammering against her chest so hard she thought it might break. She felt all the blood drain from her face. He gave a speech about working together, being efficient, and a new time of creativity. It was a standard, boring business speech, but coming from him, every word felt like a personal threat. After the speech, as the shocked employees began to leave, Christopher Harrington came down from the stage. He moved through the crowd like a shark moving through a school of fish. His presence made conversations stop as he passed. Paige tried to shrink and blend into the background, praying he would just walk past. He didn't. He stopped directly in front of her. Her co-workers took a step back without thinking, leaving her alone, standing before him. Miss Blake, isn't it? He said. His voice was calm and low, but it carried power that made the hairs on her arms stand up. His eyes, however, were not calm. They were shining with a dangerous, knowing light. I was looking at your employee file this morning. You have promising talent. He held out his hand. It was not a friendly gesture. It was a command. Numbly, she placed her shaking hand in his. His grip was firm. His skin was warm, and the brief touch sent a jolt of memory, of the bar, of his hand on her back, through her. I'd like to see you in my new office in 5 minutes, he said, his voice dropping so only she could hear. We have a lot to talk about regarding your future with this company. Hey there. Before we continue, don't forget to hit subscribe and help us grow. Thank you for being here. Let's keep going. The 5-minute walk to the boss's office felt like a mile-long walk to something terrible. Paige's legs were shaking. Her mind was a crazy whirlwind of panic and disbelief. This couldn't be happening. It was the cruelest joke in the universe. She knocked on the heavy wooden door. Her knuckles barely made a sound. Come in, a calm, controlled voice commanded. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The office, once the familiar, slightly messy space of her old boss, had been completely changed. It was now a clean fortress of glass and steel, with a huge desk and a big window view of the city. Christopher Harrington stood by the window, his back to her, looking out at his new kingdom. Close the door, he said without turning around. She did as she was told. The soft click of the door closing echoed in the silent, huge room. He turned slowly, like a predator enjoying the moment. His face was a mask of cool calmness, but his eyes were dancing with a dark, teasing amusement. What a performance, Miss Blake, he began. His voice was a low, smooth purr. I must admit it was the most memorable introduction I've ever had to a new employee. He began to walk slowly toward her, circling her as if she were a piece of art he was thinking about buying. The boldness, the passion, the pure, reckless impulsiveness of it all, truly remarkable. Mr. Harrington, she began. Her voice was barely a whisper. I'm so sorry. I had no idea who you were. It was a mistake, a terrible, unprofessional. A mistake, he interrupted, stopping directly in front of her. Oh, I don't think so. It was a planned move. A desperate, emotional, but planned move to hurt an enemy. And it was very, very effective. He was so close she could smell the faint, clean scent of his cologne, the same scent from the bar. The problem, Paige, he said, his voice dropping, using her first name for the first time, is that your passion and your recklessness are now mine, and I cannot have my people behaving in such an unpredictable way. She braced herself, expecting the worst. I understand, I'll clean out my desk." He let out a short, humorless laugh. "Fire you? Oh no, that would be far too simple. Firing you would mean I don't get to enjoy the delightful irony of this situation, and I do so love irony." He moved back to his desk, a new, dangerous glint in his eye. "No, you're not fired, but your old position on the junior design team no longer exists." A cold dread washed over her. "What?" "From this moment on, you are my personal design assistant," he announced. The title sounded both like a promotion and a prison sentence. "You will report directly and only to me. You will work on all my important projects. You will be at my command. Your desk will be moved to the room just outside this office." He had her. He had separated her from her team, from her coworkers, from any piece of her old work life. He had placed her directly under his control in a position where she would have to see him and work with him every single day. "Consider this a unique opportunity, Paige," he said, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. "An opportunity to prove that your passion is not limited to dramatic displays in bars. You want it to be exciting. Well, your life is about to get very exciting indeed." She stood there, frozen, realizing the full extent of her nightmare. She hadn't just kissed a stranger. She had kissed her new boss, her new tormentor, the man who now held her entire future in his hands. Her one-night act of revenge had just turned into a long-term punishment. The next morning, Paige's world had been completely turned upside down. Her desk, once nestled in the noisy, team-based chaos of the design department, was now in the silent, clean room outside Christopher's office. It was a beautiful, lonely island. Her former co-workers would walk past, giving her small, pitying smiles, or avoiding her eyes altogether. She was no longer one of them. She was now the boss's personal design assistant, a title that dripped with suspicion and gossip. Christopher wasted no time in giving her first project. He called her into his office, the glint of challenge in his eyes. "Your first task is to redesign the company logo for Harrington Media itself," he announced, his tone sounding casual. Paige's blood ran cold. The Harrington Media logo was an institution, a worldwide known symbol of power and influence. Redesigning it was a huge task, a career-making or career-breaking project of the highest possible stakes. "Our current logo is stale," he continued, leaning back in his chair. "It lacks vision. It needs new life. It needs passion." He let the word hang in the air, a deliberate, pointed reference to their first meeting. "I want to see your starting concepts by the end of the week." It was an impossible deadline. A project this huge should take months of research and development, not 4 days. She knew immediately what this was. A test. A trial by fire designed to make her fail. For the next 4 days, Paige barely slept. She threw herself into the work with a fierce, desperate energy. She filled sketchbooks with ideas, spent hours researching company branding theory, and drank enough coffee to fuel a small army. She was determined not to give him the satisfaction of watching her fail. She worked late each night, often the last person in the building besides Christopher himself, who seemed to live in his office. The dynamic between them was a tense, silent war. He would walk past her desk without a word, but she could feel his eyes on her, watching, judging. On the final night before the deadline, she was in his office pinning her final 3 concepts to a large presentation board. It was well past midnight. "You're still here," he said. His voice startled her. He had been standing in the doorway watching her. "The deadline is tomorrow," she replied, not looking at him. Her voice was tight with exhaustion and stress. He walked over to the board, studying her designs. They were brilliant. One was a bold update of the current logo. The second was a complete new departure. The third was a clever minimalist design that was both modern and timeless. He was silent for a long time. His face was unreadable. "This one," he said finally, pointing to the third minimalist concept. "It's clean, powerful, intelligent. But the font choice is weak. It lacks authority." "I disagree," she shot back. Her exhaustion made her bold. "The sans serif font is modern and approachable. It's meant to signal a shift toward a more transparent, forward-thinking company. An authoritative serif font would be a step backward. It's predictable." He turned to face her, a flicker of anger in his eyes. "Are you calling my judgment predictable, Miss Blake?" "I'm calling your suggestions safe," she shot back. Her own frustration boiled over. "You talk about wanting new life and passion, but when you see it, you want to control it. to force it into a box you already understand. You're a micromanager, Mr. Harrington. The words hung in the air, a shocking act of talking back. He took a step closer. His towering presence filled her space. They were inches apart. The adrenaline of their argument was a real current between them. His eyes, dark and intense, dropped to her lips. The memory of the kiss, the raw electric moment in the bar, flashed between them as real and as present as the tension in the room. He leaned in. His breath was warm on her cheek. For a heart-stopping second, she thought he was going to kiss her again. But then he abruptly pulled back. His face was once again a mask of cool control. "The deadline is 9 a.m., Miss Blake," he said. His voice was a low, dangerous growl. "Don't disappoint me." He turned and walked out of the office, leaving her standing there. Her heart was hammering. Her body was trembling with a confusing, infuriating mix of anger, adrenaline, and undeniable attraction. Paige's minimalist logo design, after a tense final review, was chosen. Christopher, true to his nature, took full credit for guiding the project to success. But the whispers in the industry's design circles knew the truth. The brilliant, clean concept had come from Paige Blake. Her name, once unknown, was suddenly on the map. It was a small victory, but it was hers. The victory, however, came with a bitter consequence. Charles, her ex, heard the news. He discovered that not only had Paige not been fired, but she was now working directly under the new billionaire boss, the very man she had kissed in the bar. Consumed by a toxic mix of jealousy and a wounded ego, he did something petty and destructive. One afternoon, he showed up in the gleaming marble lobby of Harrington Media headquarters. "I'm here to see Paige Blake," he announced to the receptionist. His voice was loud and rude. "Do you have an appointment, sir?" The receptionist asked politely. "No, I don't have an appointment," Charles sneered. "But I'm sure she'll see me. We have some unfinished business." He leaned in like he was sharing a secret. "You know, it's amazing how fast some people climb the company ladder once they start sleeping with the boss." The receptionist's eyes widened in shock. The comment was loud enough for several people in the lobby to hear. It was a deliberate public attempt to embarrass Paige and ruin her newfound professional standing. The receptionist, following the rules, quietly alerted security and then, knowing how serious the situation was, called Christopher's office directly. Paige, hearing the noise from her desk in the room outside the office, felt a cold dread wash over her. She recognized that voice. She walked to the glass doors of the office and looked down into the lobby. She saw Charles making a scene. Her heart sank. Before she could react, Christopher emerged from his office. His face was a mask of thunderous rage. He had clearly been listening on the intercom. "Stay here," he commanded her. His voice was a low, dangerous growl. He didn't take the elevator. He descended the grand sweeping staircase that connected the executive floor to the lobby. His movements were controlled, deliberate, and utterly menacing. Every eye in the lobby was on him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He stopped directly in front of Charles. His presence was so powerful it seemed to suck the air out of the room. "You must be Mr. Davies," Christopher said. His voice was a blade of ice. "Charles," he corrected, trying to sound confident but failing miserably. "I don't care what your name is," Christopher continued. His voice dropped even lower. "Miss Blake is currently busy doing the brilliant, innovative work that her talent deserves. Work that is important to the future of my company. You, on the other hand, are trespassing on private property and harassing one of my most valued employees." He took a step closer, and Charles instinctively flinched back. "This is the only time I will say this. Security will escort you out. If you ever set foot in this building again, if you ever contact Miss Blake again, if I even hear you speak her name in a public place again, the full weight of the Harrington Media legal department will come down on you. We will take apart your career, your reputation, and your finances with such surgical precision that you will spend the rest of your life wishing you had never heard the name Paige Blake. Am I clear?" Charles, pale and trembling, could only nod. "Good," Christopher said, turning his back on him as security guards moved in. He looked up and his eyes met Paige's, who had been watching the entire scene, frozen from the top of the stairs. The cold, deadly fury in his face softened for a fraction of a second, replaced by a flicker of something else. Concern. "Are you all right?" he asked. His voice was just loud enough for her to hear. She could only nod. Her throat was tight with a confusing mix of emotions. He hadn't used the situation to mock her or to remind her of her recklessness. He hadn't put the blame on her. He had defended her fiercely and publicly. He had protected her reputation and her honor with the cold, brutal efficiency of a king, defending his most prized possession. And it was the most confusing and thrilling thing she had ever witnessed. In the aftermath of the lobby incident, a new unspoken understanding settled between them. Christopher's public defense of her had been a turning point. He had treated her not as a subordinate to be controlled, but as a valued person to be protected. The gossip in the office quieted down, replaced by a grudging respect. Paige, in turn, found it harder and harder to maintain her professional dislike toward him. He was still her demanding, infuriatingly controlling boss, but he was also the man who had shielded her without hesitation. Their fragile new dynamic was put to the test 2 weeks later. "Pack a bag," Christopher announced, walking into her room without breaking stride. "We're going to Milan. There's a design show. We leave in 3 hours. The trip was a whirlwind." Milan was a city of art, fashion, and undeniable romance, a dangerous backdrop for their already complicated relationship. During the day, they were all business. They moved through the show with professional teamwork that surprised them both, debating design ideas, critiquing new trends, and gathering ideas for Harrington Media's next big project. They were a great team. Their minds seemed to work in perfect harmony. But at night, the professional lines blurred. Under the guise of market research and client dinners, they explored the city. They shared a plate of pasta in a tiny family-owned restaurant, arguing playfully about which artist had more influence on modern design. They walked through the historic Brera district. The warm evening air was filled with the sound of music and laughter. For moments at a time, she would forget he was her boss, the man who held her career in his hands. He was just Christopher, a man with a surprisingly sharp wit and a hidden passion for architecture. The breaking point came on their last night. After a long, successful day, they returned to their hotel suite, a magnificent space with a shared living area and a large balcony overlooking the spires of the Duomo. "A successful trip, I think," Christopher said, loosening his tie as he poured them both a glass of wine. "Very successful," Paige agreed, taking the glass he offered. They stood on the balcony. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the city. "The atmosphere was charged, intimate, Paige," he said softly. His voice lost its usual commanding edge. He turned to face her, leaning against the railing. "I have to ask. That night at the bar, why me?" It was the first time he had directly addressed the kiss since she had started working for him. The question was quiet, genuine, stripped of all mockery. She looked out at the magnificent cathedral, its spires reaching for the sky. "I was hurt," she admitted. Her voice was barely a whisper. "And angry. I wanted to hurt him back. And you—" She paused, then finally looked at him. "You looked like the most powerful man in the room. You looked strong, untouchable." He was silent for a long moment. His gaze was intense. He moved closer. The space between them shrank until she could feel the heat from his body. "And what if I kissed you now, Paige?" he murmured. His voice was a low, husky caress. With no revenge, no games, no audience. Her breath caught in her throat. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was it, the moment she had been both dreading and craving. He reached out. His hand gently cupped her cheek. His thumb stroked her skin. His eyes searched hers, full of a raw, unguarded emotion she had never seen before. He leaned in. His lips were just inches from hers. She closed her eyes. Her body swayed toward him in surrender, and then he stopped. He let out a sharp, frustrated breath and pulled back, dropping his hand as if he'd been burned. He turned away from her, gripping the balcony railing. His knuckles were white. "We have an early flight," he said. His voice was strained, harsh. "You should get some sleep." He didn't look at her again. He walked back into the suite and disappeared into his room, leaving her alone on the balcony. Her body was trembling. Her lips were aching with the ghost of a kiss that had been promised and then cruelly, inexplicably denied. The flight back from Milan was a silent, agonizing torture. The space between them crackled with the unspoken question left hanging on the balcony. Why had he pulled back? The almost kiss was a ghost that haunted Paige, a constant, frustrating reminder of the impossible wall that still stood between them. Back in the office, Christopher was more distant and demanding than ever. He threw himself back into his work with a vengeance. His interactions with Paige became clipped, formal, and strictly professional. It was as if he was trying to erase the intimacy of Milan, to rebuild the wall he himself had almost torn down. Paige, hurt and confused, retreated into her own shell, focusing on her work and trying to ignore the ache in her heart. A few weeks later, while organizing his chaotic digital calendar, a task he had pointedly assigned her, she saw it. It was a recurring monthly appointment blocked out for 3 hours every third Thursday. Unlike his other meetings, which were carefully labeled board meeting or acquisition call Tokyo, this one was marked with a single cryptic word: clinic. A jolt of unease went through her. Was he sick? The thought was a cold, sharp jab of fear she wasn't prepared for. But he was the picture of health, a man in his prime. Maybe it was a routine checkup, but 3 hours every month, it didn't add up. Her curiosity, now piqued, became a low-grade obsession. It was a puzzle, and she was a natural problem solver. During a quiet afternoon when he was locked in a board meeting, she did something she knew she shouldn't. She opened a private browser window and typed the name of the clinic from his calendar into the search bar. The results surprised her. The Westwood Clinic wasn't a hospital or a private doctor's office. It was a high-end, exclusive care facility, a hospice. Her heart began to pound. Why would a man like Christopher Harrington have a recurring appointment at a hospice? Driven by a need she didn't fully understand, she dug deeper. She used the research skills she had honed as a designer to cross-reference public records, charity databases, and old society articles. It took her 2 hours, but she finally found it. An old article from a charity journal detailing the major anonymous donors to the Westwood Clinic. The article mentioned that the clinic's primary benefactor, who had funded the construction of an entire new wing, had done so in memory of his mother, Elena Harrington, who had passed away there 5 years prior after a long, painful battle with a degenerative neurological disease. The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. The coldness, the obsession with control, the demanding perfectionism, the way he had looked at her with such raw concern when she was sick, the way he had pulled back from the kiss in Milan as if terrified of getting too close. It wasn't arrogance. It was armor. He wasn't a man who was afraid of being hurt in a business deal. He was a man who had watched helplessly as the person he loved most was slowly, cruelly taken from him by something he couldn't fight, couldn't control, and couldn't fix. His entire life, his entire empire was a fortress built around the memory of that powerlessness. His obsession with controlling every aspect of his professional life was a desperate attempt to master a world that had once proven to him, in the most brutal way possible, that some things are utterly, heartbreakingly uncontrollable. She leaned back in her chair. The glow of the monitor illuminated her face. The anger and frustration she had felt toward him, the resentment for his games and his control, it all evaporated, replaced by a wave of profound, aching compassion. The final blow came after the board presentation. The rebranding was a huge success. The board was ecstatic, praising the new modern direction. Christopher, in his speech, gave Paige full and public credit for the design. The vision and brilliance behind this new logo belong entirely to Miss Blake, he had announced. But his praise backfired. In the eyes of her colleagues, it wasn't a validation of her talent. It was a confirmation of her special status. Later that day, she overheard Mark talking to a group in the hallway. Of course he gave her credit, he sneered. He has to keep his little pet happy. The crude, dismissive comment was a physical blow. It invalidated every late night, every ounce of creative energy, every bit of her hard work. She realized with a sickening certainty that as long as she was in this building, under his authority, she would never be seen as anything more than the boss's girlfriend. Her professional reputation, the one thing she had fought so hard to build, was being destroyed by the very relationship that was bringing her so much personal joy. She loved Christopher, but she also loved her work, her independence, her pride, and she was being forced to choose between them. The weight of the office rumors of the stolen credit and the dismissive whispers settled on Paige like a shroud. The joy she felt with Christopher was constantly being tainted by the poison of the workplace. She couldn't walk down the hall without feeling the sting of judgmental eyes. Her brilliant work, the source of her professional pride, was now the source of her greatest humiliation. She knew what she had to do. It was a heartbreaking, terrifying decision, but it was the only one she could make. That evening, she walked into Christopher's office. He was on the phone, but he smiled when he saw her, a warm, private smile that now made her heart ache. He quickly finished his call. "Perfect timing," he said, standing up. "I was just about to order dinner for us. I was thinking that new Italian place." "Christopher, we need to talk," she said. Her voice was quiet but firm. The smile on his face faded, replaced by a look of concern. He saw the pain in her eyes. "What is it? What's wrong?" She took a deep breath and placed a white envelope on his desk. "This is my letter of resignation," she said. The words felt like stones in her mouth. He stared at the envelope, then back at her. His face was a mask of shock and disbelief. "What? Why, is this about us?" "I told you, I don't care what people think, but I do," she said. Her voice was trembling but resolute. "I can't be the boss's girlfriend, Christopher. I can't have every success, every achievement attributed to you. I worked too hard to get here. My talent, my work, it has to be my own. It's the one thing I have that is truly mine." He rushed around the desk to her. His hands came up to grip her arms gently. "Then I'll protect you," he said. His voice was desperate. "I'll fire them. I'll fire Mark. I'll fire anyone who disrespects you. I'll make it clear that you earned your position." "No," she said, shaking her head. Tears welled in her eyes. "Don't you see? That just makes it worse. It proves their point. It makes me the woman who gets people fired because she's sleeping with the boss. You can't protect me from this, Christopher. Your power is the problem." The truth of her words hit him like a physical blow. He, a man who could solve any problem with his power and his money, was powerless to solve this. His very position was the weapon being used against her. "If what we have is real," she continued, her voice breaking, "if it's strong enough, it has to be able to exist outside of these walls, outside of your shadow. I can't be your employee and your partner at the same time. I have to choose. And I choose me. I choose my self-respect." He stared at her. His face was etched with a pain and desperation she had never seen before. He was losing her, and he knew it. He had finally let someone in, only to have the world he had built tear them apart. "So this is it?" he asked. His voice was a raw, broken whisper. "You're just leaving?" "I have to," she sobbed, pulling away from his grasp. She left the letter of resignation on his desk, a white flag of surrender in a battle she couldn't win. She turned and walked out of his office, out of the building, out of the life she had just begun to build with him. She was choosing to lose him in the desperate, heartbreaking hope that it was the only way they could ever truly be together. The day after Paige resigned was the longest day of Christopher's life. Her empty desk outside his office was a constant gaping wound. The silence was deafening. He had spent the night staring at her letter of resignation. Her words echoed in his mind. "Your power is the problem." She was right. He had built an empire on control, and that very control was now the thing that was costing him the only person who had ever managed to break through it. He had two choices. He could let her go, accepting that his world was too toxic for a love as real as theirs, or he could change the world. The next morning, he made his decision at 10 a.m. Another emergency all-hands meeting was called. The entire company gathered in the conference room. The air was buzzing with guesses. Had the boss's jilted lover finally been fired? Christopher walked onto the stage, but he was not the same man who had addressed them weeks ago. The cold, intimidating armor was gone. He looked tired, human, and resolute. "Good morning," he began. His voice was quiet but firm, commanding the room's attention. "I've called you all here today to address the recent departure of Paige Blake." A murmur went through the crowd. There have been rumors and guessing regarding Miss Blake's role in this company and her relationship with me, he continued. His gaze swept across the room, seeming to land on every person who had ever whispered a malicious word. "Let me be perfectly clear. Paige Blake is the most talented, innovative, and dedicated designer I have ever had the privilege of working with. The success of the Harrington Media rebranding is hers and hers alone. Her vision has set the course for the future of this company." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. He saw Mark, her old boss, looking distinctly uncomfortable in the crowd. "Miss Blake resigned," Christopher said, his voice turning hard, "because the culture in this office, a culture that I, as your boss, I'm responsible for, made her feel that her success was not her own. It made her feel that her talent was being overshadowed by her personal life. And that is a failure of leadership. My failure, The room was dead silent. No one had ever heard a boss, especially not the formidable Christopher Harrington, admit to failure. Effective immediately, he announced, his eyes finding Mark in the crowd. Mark Reynolds will be transferred. He will be heading up our new satellite office in Anchorage, Alaska. I'm sure his leadership will be appreciated there. A collective gasp went through the room. It was a public execution. This is a message to all of you, Christopher said. His voice was a blade of ice. This company will be a meritocracy. We will not tolerate gossip, harassment, or the undermining of talent. From now on, your work is the only thing that will speak for you. He took a deep breath. His expression softened as he came to the hardest part. As for me, he said, his voice suddenly vulnerable, I have realized that my own leadership requires a new perspective. Therefore, I will be taking a 1-month leave of absence, effective immediately. The shock in the room was palpable. I am taking this time, he concluded, his voice now quiet, personal, directed not at the crowd but at an audience of one, wherever she was, to try and win back the love and respect of the most brilliant woman I have ever known. Thank you. He dropped the microphone onto the podium with a thud that echoed in the stunned silence. He turned and walked off the stage, leaving behind his company, his reputation, and his entire world of control. He had made his choice. He was choosing her. Paige saw the speech. A friend from the office had sent her a link to a video someone had secretly recorded. She watched it on her laptop in her small, quiet apartment, her hands pressed to her mouth in disbelief. She watched it once, then twice, then a third time, the tears streaming down her face. He had done it. He had taken apart his own image, admitted his failure, and punished the people who had wronged her, all in front of the entire company. He hadn't just defended her. He had validated her publicly and unequivocally. And then he had given up his power, his control, all for the chance to win her back. 2 days later, there was a knock on her door. She opened it to find him standing there. He wasn't the boss of Harrington Media. He was just Christopher. He was dressed in a simple pair of jeans and a gray sweater, looking nervous and more handsome than she had ever seen him. He wasn't holding flowers or a gift. His hands were empty. A 1-month leave of absence, he said. His voice was quiet, a hopeful, tentative smile on his face. No emails, no board meetings, no conference calls. Just me. He took a small, hesitant step forward. Is it enough time to prove to you that I'm not just your boss? She didn't answer with words. She stepped aside and opened the door wider, inviting him in. The month that followed was a revelation. They didn't go to fancy restaurants or exclusive parties. They went to museums. They took long walks in the park. They cooked dinner together in her tiny kitchen, bumping elbows and laughing as they argued over how much garlic was too much garlic. He met her family, not as a billionaire benefactor, but as the man who was in love with their daughter. He was charming, respectful, and surprisingly down to earth. She learned about the boy who had lost his mother too young, the boy who had built a fortress of control to keep the world at bay. He learned about the girl who had dreamed of being an artist, who had put her own ambitions on hold to support her family. They talked for hours, peeling back the layers of their public personas and revealing the real, vulnerable people underneath. They fell in love all over again. But this time it wasn't a chaotic, confusing collision of power and attraction. It was a quiet, steady, and deeply intentional coming together of two equals. On the last day of his leave, they were sitting on a bench in the same park where they had had one of their first dates. My month is up, he said softly, taking her hand. I go back to being the boss tomorrow. A flicker of the old fear went through her. What does that mean for us? He turned to her. His expression was serious. His gray eyes were full of a love so profound it took her breath away. It means I go back to my job, but it doesn't change who I am. Not anymore. You changed me, Paige. He squeezed her hand. I love you, and I will spend the rest of my life proving that to you, whether I'm in a boardroom or in your tiny kitchen. It was her turn to make a choice. She could let the fear win, or she could trust the man he had become. She leaned in and kissed him, a slow, sweet kiss filled with all the hope and promise of their new beginning. Yes, she whispered against his lips. That's enough. Christopher's return to Harrington Media was the subject of intense guessing, but the reality was far quieter and more profound than anyone expected. He and Paige walked into the building on that Monday morning hand in hand, a silent, united front. The message was clear and undeniable. They were a couple, partners, and they were not hiding. The atmosphere in the office had transformed. The public shaming of Mark and Christopher's own vulnerability had sent a shockwave through the corporate culture. The gossip had ceased, replaced by a quiet, watchful respect. Christopher's first order of business was to call Paige into his office. "Welcome back," he said, a warm, genuine smile on his face. "I've had your old desk moved back to the design department. Your former position is waiting for you." Paige smiled but shook her head. "Thank you, Christopher, but I can't take it." His face fell. "Paige, I thought we did." She interrupted gently. "But nothing has changed. I'd still be your employee. We'd be right back where we started. I told you, I can't work under your shadow." She placed a thick, professionally bound document on his desk. The title on the cover read, "Proposal for Blake Creative, an independent creative agency." He looked up at her, intrigued. "I'm not asking for my job back," she explained. Her voice was confident and clear. "I'm proposing a business partnership. I want to launch my own creative design agency, an independent subsidiary of Harrington Media. I'll be the boss. I'll build my own team, manage my own clients, including Harrington Media, and run my own P&L. You won't be my boss. You'll be my primary investor and a partner on the board." He read through the proposal. His expression shifted from surprise to profound admiration. It was brilliant. The business plan was meticulous. The financial projections were ambitious but realistic, and the vision was clear. She wasn't asking for a handout. She was demanding a seat at the table, a kingdom of her own alongside his. He looked up from the proposal, a slow, proud smile spreading across his face. He had fallen in love with her talent, her fire, her refusal to be controlled, and now she was using all of those qualities to forge her own path to meet him as an equal. "You're not asking me to hire you," he said. The admiration was clear in his voice. "You're asking me to invest in you." "I am," she confirmed, her chin held high. "I'm asking you to bet on me, not as your girlfriend but as a businesswoman." He stood up and walked around the desk to her. He didn't look at her like a boss assessing a proposal. He looked at her like a man who was utterly in awe of the woman standing before him. "It's the smartest investment I'll ever make," he said. He extended his hand. "Congratulations, Madam CEO," she took his hand, a brilliant, triumphant smile on her face. They shook on it, not as boss and employee, but as partners. Then he pulled her into his arms and sealed their new business deal with a kiss, a celebration of the new equal partnership they had just forged in business and in life. 1 year later, the offices of Blake Creative were a vibrant, chaotic hub of innovation. The space, which occupied an entire floor of the Harrington Media Tower, was the complete opposite of Christopher's minimalist fortress. It was filled with color, music, and the loud, passionate arguments of talented designers. And at its center was Paige. She stood at the head of a large conference table, leading her team through a final presentation for a major new client. She was no longer the timid girl in the corner. She was a leader, confident, respected, and brilliant. In her own right, her agency had become a resounding success, one of the most profitable and critically acclaimed subsidiaries under the Harrington Media umbrella. Christopher walked in quietly at the end of the meeting, not as the overarching boss, but as a proud, supportive partner. He leaned against the doorframe, a soft smile on his face as he watched her command the room. The respect and admiration between them were a quiet, powerful current that everyone in the room could feel. Later that evening, they stood in her office, which had a view that rivaled his own. On a shelf behind her desk was a sleek, modern trophy, a prestigious national design award that Blake Creative had just won for their Harrington Media rebranding campaign. "Who would have thought," she mused, tracing the cool metal of the award with her finger, "that a desperate, vengeful kiss in a bar would lead to all of this?" He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "I would," he whispered in her ear. "It was the best investment I ever made," she laughed, leaning back against his chest. "I thought I was just a promising talent you were taking a risk on." "You were never a risk, Paige," he said. His voice was a low, serious murmur. "You were a sure thing. I just had to be smart enough to get out of your way." She turned in his arms to face him. Her eyes were shining with a love that was now steady, deep, and sure. I'm glad you did. Me too, he said, before leaning in to kiss her. They were not just a couple in love. They were a power couple, an empire of two, built not on a contract of convenience, but on a foundation of mutual respect, shared ambition, and a love that had rewritten all the rules. Our story ends here, sweetheart. But many more are waiting for you. Subscribe. Tell me in the comments what you felt about this one, and we'll meet again very soon. Thank you, and see you in the next.